All right, guys, we are in Unit 5, Lesson 2. We're going to be talking about genes and genetics, okay? So, not the most exciting topic, but it's a very, very important topic, especially those of you that want to have any kind of career in animal science. You're going to have to study these in depth. We're just going to touch on the basis of it, though. So, genetics, make sure you know that is the study of genes. Okay, and a gene is a unit of hereditary material. So you are made up of a bunch of genes, and a gene is what makes you what you are. It carries a trait you inherit from your parents. So a gene is why you have brown or blonde or black hair. Genes are located on a chromosome. A chromosome is a rod-like structure that's made of DNA, and that carries genetic history. So this is all what makes you who you are, okay? Are genes, chromosomes, and genetics, and same with animals, right? We are animals. We are an animal. We are a vertebrate. So, as we learned earlier, cells carry information about genes in their nuclei. So, cells are going to carry our genes. A chromosome is in the cell. It's a really tiny part, but it carries a long genetic history with it. So once genes determine your traits, they're with you at the cellular level. So they are in deep with you. So there's just a picture that kind of shows the cell. Inside that cell's nucleus is going to have the chromosomes, and the chromosomes are going to have the DNA. So each living thing has its own blueprint. So an individual gets 2 copies of each gene. You get one from each parent, right? Remember, you get a dominant trait and a recessive trait. The dominant is the trait that's going to manifest, the trait that's going to show. So you may have a mom that has red hair and a dad that has brown hair. Well, brown hair is the dominant trait. So you're going to get both those genes. However, the dominant one, the brown hair, is what you're going to have. That's why you have brown hair. Makes sense? Trait provided by the other parent doesn't go away. It stays there. It's hidden. It's called the recessive trait. And what's kind of cool about this is the recessive trait, it's going to keep going and going to the offspring, and then all of a sudden it may pop up if it finds another recessive trait, joins with it to make a dominant. So eventually you'll get that red hair. In sheep, their example is black wool is a recessive trait, and white wool is the dominant. So white wool is the one that's going to prevail. However, if a sheep has parents that both carry that gene for black wool, they'll have black wool. So their parents don't necessarily have to be black, have black wool for it to show. Right? So the recessive get together, and that's how you get a dominant. So the sex of an offspring, the gender is determined by the sperm. So the egg, the female, contains the X chromosome, and the sperm from the male is going to contain another X chromosome or a Y chromosome. So if it's a female, that means that the male had an X chromosome and it's XX. If it's a male, that means XY, because the male gave a Y chromosome. Okay? All right, so it says genetics is like baking a cake, where you add ingredients, stir them up, and you get desired results. A lot of people in livestock, they work with these genetics to make the animals be what they are. There is even... you can get sexed semen. So whenever you're going to artificially inseminate an animal, you can pay extra and say, I want a heifer every time because I'm growing a breeding operation and I have no use for steers, right? So I'm going to buy female offspring. Okay, you can do that, female sperm. So I'm going to buy XX sperm instead of the XY. The scientists, they can go in the sperm and read it in a microscope and tell which is which, sort it out and separate it, and give that to you. So it's pretty crazy what all they can do. And they can work the traits, like I want a black Angus, I don't want the red hair on my Angus, so they'll do that. Not all traits are heritable. That means that it's passed down to the offspring. So if they want to create a longer body in an animal, They can't do it through breeding rabbits, cattle, sheep, or swine because body length is not a heritable trait in these animals. Nature already decided what that will be, and there's not anything science can do to change it. So some things are stuck. They can't manipulate everything, which I think is good. So it says body length in horses. Look at that example right there. So because body length in horses is about 25% heritable, through selective breeding, they can produce a slightly longer body, but it requires a lot of effort for not very much result. Why would you want a longer body? Especially in livestock like that we eat, you want it because that's more meat, right, on that animal. Larger body, maybe more power as well when you're saying that looking at a horse standpoint. Chickens have no heritability and temperament. So if you're trying to make a breed of nice chickens, it's not going to work. So if you have a friendly chicken, that's not passed down. So that's interesting. So horses can be bred for speed, which is kind of why we've got such fast race horses now. Breed the fastest to the fastest, and you get the faster offspring. Speedy sheep, the fact that sheep cannot be bred for speed. That's why this is a good indication why there's no industry built around racing them, which would be very interesting. No racing sheep. So that's really interesting to think about the different breed or different qualities that can be passed down in different animals. And that's why we use different animals for different things and why we're able to create this great vigor of animal. So talk about the history of genetics. You need to know the father of genetics is this Gregor Mendel right here. He was an Austrian monk who studied math and science. And he began studying the genetics of plants. And he noticed that some plants produced offspring with traits that looked exactly like the parent plants. So he would mix the plants to see if their offspring would produce different traits. And as he experimented, he realized some genes were more dominant and some were recessive. So this led to a realization that mixing genes did not always result in 50% chance. And that's why they eventually, Reginald Punnett, came up with the Punnett square. Okay, so here's a good example of the Punnett square, right? Y'all remember seeing this in biology? So you've got your genes that come from the parent. Parent 2 offered white wool and black wool, dominant for white, recessive for black, dominant for white wool, recessive for black. So remember, you put them in the 4 squares. So we take the first 2. So we've got, that one's going to be total dominant for white wool. We have 2 that are dominant of white wool, but they have that recessive black wool gene. And then you have a 25% chance of getting the black wool. So from this, we see that since we had 3 where the white was dominant, that's going to be a 75% chance that we're going to have white wool. And we had 1 that was recessive, we're going to have a 25%, excuse my writing, that it's going to have black wool. Okay? So you can write the ratio as a percent or 3 to 1 like they do there. So pretty much, unless you hit that 25% of the recessive black wool, that sheep's going to be white because the white is dominant. So you can see that proves that it's not 50%. So it says sometimes environment, mental influences, or mistakes can cause mutations, changes in the genetic sequence. So this may mean that chromosomes may be missing elements or added them. So genetic mutations are occasionally really beneficial. An example in ag is an Angus cattle. Those are, usually if you see a black cow, that's an Angus cow, or it has some sort of Angus in it, right? That's the popular beef cow that we see. They're naturally polled, and polled means that they don't have any horns. Okay, this was a mutation that became dominant long ago. Why do you think it would be beneficial for cattle not to have horns? Right? Well, I can, as a person that has cattle, I can say that it's very beneficial when they don't have horns, just whenever you're working the animals. Okay, horns can be very dangerous. Um, so having polled animals makes it safer for these workers. Now, there still are um, different animals that have, or breeds that are going to have horns, and there's nothing wrong with that. But that's kind of a benefit that came from that mutation, would be the polled. So the merging of two breeds is called crossbreeding. And it's used in ag to find desirable traits. So, and I've talked about this a lot, and it's a great example. I'm going to use it again. The Brangus. You've got the Brahma and the Angus. Brahma is a cow that's got the hump on its back. It's from India. It's really known for hot weather. Lives in the desert. You know, it can go a long time without water. It's really hardy. And we've got the Angus, who likes it a little bit cooler weather, but they've got really, really good meat. The best marbling out there, which is the fat in the meat, the best flavor. We're going to combine those, and we get a really good quality animal that's great marbling, great to eat. Plus, we get the hardiness and durability of the Brahman. And that's a good crossbreed. So you can actually go to college and study how to, manipulate these breeds, study genetics, work on, creating that sex semen or recessive or dominant genes. And that's through biotechnology. And biotechnology is the tools of biological processes to make better products. Not only can farmers breed different species of animals together or select seeds to make more of products, but they can improve quality, lower cost, and make plant animals more resistant to disease or tolerant of certain conditions. And this is the way that we're able to feed the world, is because even though we're getting more land, or more land is getting built on, and we're losing the agriculture land, if we're able to multiply our output that we have now with less land, that's a benefit, right? So biotechnology is very important. So it talks about what I talked about, kind of the sex semen and embryos. There's even ways where, and it gets, we could talk about this all day. I'm just trying to touch the surface of it. But you could even do IVF and in vitro, and that's where you actually use another cow's uterus as a housing spot, and you can take, maybe you've got a good cow that's good at calving. She's really good at that, but you don't like her qualities. You could take the embryo from this other cow that looks great, but she's not a good mama, sperm of a bull, put it all in that donor cow, and boom, you've got your calf. So there are a lot of different ways you can go around it, a lot of ways that ranchers manipulate genes in order to get the best product. Genetic engineering is the purposeful manipulation of DNA to make new types of organisms. So it says when DNA from one organism is artificially added to unrelated, it's called transgenic modification. Differs from crossbreeding and hybridization because it's bringing new possibilities in agriscience. So it's like we started with selective breeding, and now we get genetic engineering that goes way further. So the cattle industry would benefit if cows could be genetically altered to be immune to BSE, which is mad cow disease, because it's really fatal in cows, and it causes fatal disease if you eat infected meat. So if we could figure that out and modify those genes, then we're going to eliminate that horrible disease. So that's pretty interesting. So one of the most visible issues in ag is the debate over GMOs, genetically modified organisms. Everybody loves to get on this debate. Those in which genetic engineering has occurred. Everything we've talked about deals with genetic engineering. We've been talking about animals, but this happens with plants as well. Genetically modified plants have increased global food production, so they're a benefit. They're great. Like I use the corn for an example. We have genetically modified corn. This old corn was producing 2 ears of corn on each stalk. Now we're producing 3, and it's larger corn. So we're really helping, and it's disease resistant. So that's what a GMO does, and it's going to help lower food costs and create more food. So it's widely used in crops. 92% of corn in the U.S. in 2020 was GMO. Cotton and soybeans are also using GMOs. So consumers have concerns, but there's really, it's not toxic. There's not much, bad on it. It's just educating the public on GMOs because everyone's a little bit scared of it just because it sounds scary, right? There are no genetically modified animals out there right now that are genetically engineered animals, but they are working on some. Oh, I guess, yeah, they do have a salmon. That was proved in 2015. That's the only animal. So if people tell you there's GMO beef, no, that's not right. There's not any that are approved. So that's a lot of information. I really just skimmed the surface. It's a really great topic. If you're interested in it, please read more about this. It's a great career to go into. A lot of